There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Daniel here with ZCI with my co-host.
Tyler Blott with Keller Williams Advantage Real Estate.
Today we are joined by Tara Folino of Castle Insurance. This is an especially important time for her because we've had a lot of rain. We're coming out of storm season, so we wanted to bring her on to make sure you guys understood all of the ins and outs of your coverage, your homeowner's policy, and things that you can look out for to avoid some of the pitfalls that we saw, especially last year during the 527 storms. People were unprepared. So, Tara, tell us a little bit about your company. What do you do?
Sure. So we are an independent agency. We've been around since 1922, and I'm one of the Castles or family members in the business. And we focus on helping individuals with their personal and business insurance needs. We have a number of insurance companies that we're able to place people with. We're not just a captive agent where we just have one company. So we're able to help individuals that may have unique situations. We do have multiple carriers that we can quote them with. So typically we have a lot of flexibility for those individuals.
And that's super important because a lot of times we've seen agents that, are more tied to their insurance company that they're working for rather than the policyholder. And when you have split loyalties like that, they're not always going to have the homeowner in mind first.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we are there to help be the advocate for that individual who's buying their coverage. And then if there's ever a claim, we're there as their advocate as well between them and the insurance company. So we always have their best interest in mind.
Yeah, which helps a lot. Actually, the agents have, they don't make the final call, but them being on your side can help a ton as a homeowner.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Tyler, go ahead.
So kind of going off that vein, would you mind discussing with us what sorts of things are covered under a normal homeowner's insurance policy?
Sure. So every homeowner's insurance policy typically has some basic coverage. It's going to be, of course, on the dwelling itself, any related private structures, whether that be a fence or a shed or garage, personal property coverage, loss of use coverage, and then, of course, their personal liability coverage. And then there are a number of optional things that can always be added on a policy. Some insurance companies give a package of endorsements that are included, but not all do. So it's not a one-size-fits-all type policy. Usually, as the agent, I ask a lot of questions about the home that individual owns, about them as the homeowner, just to find out what their needs are and what their exposures are so that we can make sure that they have the right coverage in place. So for instance, if there is a home that has a basement, they have an increased risk for something called water and sewage backup. And this is not always included on a policy. It's something that typically needs to be added. And then there are a number of levels of coverage that can be added. So for an unfinished basement, one coverage limit may be appropriate, but for a finished basement where there are lots of contents and furniture and flooring and drywall, typically those folks have a greater need for a higher limit of coverage. So lots of things to choose from when it comes to purchasing a homeowner's policy.
Absolutely. And it definitely sounds like it's not a cookie cutter answer for anybody. Everybody really needs to have a personal assessment done. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Super important that agent ask those questions and that homeowner share all that information to make sure that their risk is being covered correctly.
Now, here's a question that we get asked often. Are trees covered if they have a tree issue?
So pretty commonly on a homeowner's policy, there's going to be usually a limited amount of coverage for a tree if it were struck by lightning, typically somewhere around $500 to $1,000, and that would be coverage to replace the tree. fact that a tree falls due to wind, and if it just falls on the property, typically there's not going to be coverage unless there's maybe some special endorsement. But if you sort of look at it from the standpoint of if we all insured every single tree on our property, man, our insurance rates would be high because there's a lot of potential for trees to fall due to wind. So if that tree falls on the house itself and the damage that that tree causes on the property, whether it be the house or the garage, the fence, those structures are covered. And then of course the cost to remove that tree, the debris removal, would be insured or would be a part of the policy as well.
Very good. That was going to be my next question, because usually that's, what we see paid for is if it's on the house, yeah, we'll get it off, we'll get rid of it. But yeah, if it's in the yard, we can't insure every tree, and that's a good point. So what are some, scary things that people maybe don't realize until they file a claim? Wow, I should have had this. I should have thought about this.
Right. So there are a number of things that are sort of new these days. One is referred to as service line coverage or underground service line coverage. Probably within the last year to 2 years, a lot of carriers have started offering it. And it is something that was never offered before. It will pay for the repair or replacement of underground service lines in the event of a breakage. And for a homeowner, those can be very expensive losses if there is a breakage, because of course we're typically in the city responsible for the lines from our home to the sidewalk or the street. So usually that endorsement is something that can be added. It's super inexpensive, usually somewhere around $30 to $40 a year. Well worth the money. So it's important for a homeowner to, at renewal time, if they haven't heard from their agent, to maybe reach out to their agent and say, hey, I just want to review. What do I have? What don't I have? Maybe is there anything new available? Because typically that agent will know if there are any changes, and they can offer them additional coverage. So super important to have a review every once in a while.
Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit about what kinds of things are covered. What about things that people think are covered and aren't?
That's a great question. So we often say that a homeowner's policy is not a maintenance plan. General maintenance on a home is, of course, the insured or the homeowner's responsibility. So if the homeowner is not necessarily taking care of their property like they should, which could lead to potential losses, things that maybe happened over a period of time due to wear and tear and just lack of maintenance, those things are not going to be covered. For instance, someone who's maybe not cleaning out their gutters on a regular basis and it's causing issues with their roof and their gutters. Maybe there's some now water damage associated with that. Sometimes there can be a fine line if there's going to be coverage. So it's super important to know that, every little thing is not necessarily going to be covered by a homeowner's policy. It's intended for those things that are sudden and accidental and usually very expensive, things that are hard for a homeowner to afford to take care of on their own. For instance, the tornadoes that we had last year, a fire, maybe some vandalism, theft, big things that are usually out of the control of the homeowner.
So quick follow-up on that. A lot of times when we're discussing filing a storm claim with the homeowner, they'll say, well, I don't want my rates to go up. Can you explain when and how they go up? Can a person be singled out after a storm if they file a claim? Go into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So it depends on the carrier, and it depends too on maybe the claims history of that individual. One claim in is not going to necessarily raise rates a lot if on average we see $100, $200 increase after a claim. But if that claim was maybe associated with a catastrophic loss, for instance, the tornadoes, that was considered a catastrophic event, most insurance carriers are not going to necessarily penalize an insured for filing a claim, because obviously that affected a large scope of people. It was very much out of their control. But the typical thing to happen is if a homeowner does have more than one claim in a short period of time, say 3 to 5 years, then that's when they will see rates increase. Sometimes an insurance company will want them to maybe take a higher deductible at the following renewal, or they'll have other stipulations in order to keep a policy in force. But for the most part, one claim isn't going to make or break rates and premiums.
Got it.
So it kind of sounds like people should be judicious when deciding, is this something that we should file a claim for? And is this something that's actually sudden and accidental, or something I'm just trying to get money for?
Absolutely. And that's why it's super important to have a relationship with your agent so that you can call them and discuss it. We always encourage our insureds, before we, full force go into filing a claim, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what happened. Have you had someone like Daniel come out and take a look at your roof and determine really what's the extent of your damage? What's the cost of the repair? Before you do jump in headfirst with filing a claim. And we are there as, again, the advocate for that individual. And because we have the experience working with the insurance companies and know how these things work, we like to give advice at any time that those sort of things do crop up.
Yeah. So if someone's in the process of shopping, what's the process for actually purchasing a homeowner's policy?
Pretty simple. With us, it can be a call, it can be an email. We ask a few questions, of course, about them personally, and then also about the home. A lot of the information that we'll need about the home should be available on the county auditor's website. Then a replacement cost estimate is worked up based off of all that information about the house. And then that is what a homeowner's policy is based off of, or what a home is insured for. And then, of course, we go through all those questions, finding out what it is they need to insure, what their risks are, what their exposures are. In our agency, it would typically take less than a day to run those quotes with at least 6 companies. It's also smart for that individual to try to package their auto insurance with that same insurance company. Because of the package discounts on both policies, it's usually somewhere between 15 and 20%. So really it can add to quite a bit of money in savings, and it makes a lot of sense for them to, bundle things with one company.
Yeah. So kind of going off of that, what are some other ways that clients can save money if they're finding some budgetary constraints?
So it's important, if they're buying a home, maybe this is a new home to them, to understand what they're buying. It's going to be less costly to insure a home that's newer. Mm-hmm. Construction age is newer. It's going to be less costly to insure a home that's located within the city limits or within 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant. It's going to be more cost effective if they choose to carry a little bit higher deductible. So offsetting that risk a little bit and accepting more of the risk as the homeowner, carrying a little bit higher deductible will help. Mm-hmm. And then 2, being claim free helps a lot, of course. Most insurance carriers do reward their insureds, whether they be existing or new, with great rates because they are claim free.
Awesome.
So I made a video about this, about contractors, some eating deductibles and helping homeowners profit on claims. Can you do me a favor and talk about that for a minute? Sure.
So a home policy or any type of insurance policy is made to put you back whole before the loss, at pre-loss condition. So it is, of course, your responsibility as the policy holder to take on part of that risk, which is the deductible. And it's a detriment to all of us, to our rates as a whole here in our region or wherever it may be, for those contractors to do something unethical like that, because essentially they're charging the insurance company more to help offset deductibles with the homeowner, and it's just a bad situation. And in a lot of the ways, it's fraudulent. So to help keep those rates down, we have to, we all have to be diligent about being honest with those claims, so that the insurance companies aren't paying out more than really what they should be.
Yeah, I had a video about that, and that's probably one of the most common questions as well. Can you add $1,200 onto your estimate and send that to the insurance company so I don't have to pay my deductible? And I'm like, I cannot do that, and I will not do that.
Yeah.
You can not do some of the work and apply that ACV portion towards your deductible, and it won't get paid for again, but that's one of the ways we can do it. You can give us referrals, but I can't just inflate my estimate.
Right.
And fraudulently bill your insurance company.
Right. And then there are, safeguards in place. A lot of insurance carriers have specific programs that they use in conjunction with contractors for their rates, so that we are keeping those costs fair for everybody involved.
Right. Tyler, do you have any realtor-related insurance questions?
I think we covered this already, but after the home is purchased, how often should homeowners review their policy and update that?
Sure. So I'd say it's a good idea to at least have some kind of conversation with your agent, maybe every couple years. We try to reach out to our folks once, twice a year, once to 2 times every other year. And it's just, again, for us to review to make sure that we are covering the risk correctly. As a homeowner, though, if you've maybe made some major improvements to your house, it's a good idea to reach out to your agent and say, hey, we updated our kitchen, we now have granite, we now have all of these more expensive building materials. How does that affect my policy? Do I have enough coverage on my house? Or I've installed a pool, or, I'm now running a business out of my home. How does that affect my insurance? Because all of those things will definitely affect coverage, and we want to make sure that the correct coverage is in place. So it's for a homeowner to always sort of stay in contact.
So anytime there's a major change, just keep you in the loop.
That's right.
What are some big additional risks that homeowners sometimes take on that failure to let you guys know could result in like a non-renewal or something like that?
Sure. I don't know if it would result in a non-renewal, but it's something that we've seen, folks will build a large detached structure if they live outside the city and have some land, and they neglect to call and tell us, hey, we have this new structure. It's going to cost me $30,000 to rebuild. Oh, but wait, I don't have enough coverage on my policy. And then what if there's something like a tornado or a fire, and we don't know that? We were never informed to add that coverage to the policy. So that's, super important, just to make sure that there's, coverage in place. And to make those sort of changes on a policy are usually very inexpensive and pretty simple. So another thing that is sort of kind of a liability concern on an insurance company's part would be maybe adding a trampoline or adding a pool. Not that there wouldn't be coverage, but really it's important, again, just to make sure, hey, do I, are there any exclusions on my policies for these things? What is it that I'm covered for now? And now that I have this, there's an increased liability risk, I want to make sure that my liability is protected. So again, that's a good reason to call. Yeah,
trampolines and pools are the two that I've heard an adjuster say, well, I'm not going to make sure I don't get a picture of that pool because that's not in their coverage. It's like,
right. Yeah.
The other big one for home purchasers can be flood insurance. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit and tell us what the costs are associated with it and what the availability is?
Sure. So flood insurance is something that is never covered on a homeowner's policy. Usually what is covered is water damage, water sewage backup if there's an endorsement on the policy, but flood is considered surface water. So for an individual who's buying a home in an area that is in a flood zone, their lender, of course, is going to require that they carry flood insurance, and naturally they should want that coverage. And typically the cost of the flood policy is very similar to the cost of a second homeowner's policy. It just depends on the amount of coverage they're required or they want to carry for their home, whether it be just for the structure, if they want contents coverage in the event of a flood too. Flood is something that is basically controlled by FEMA. And we all have access, all of us agents have access to the same program, so the rates shouldn't vary between agent to agent, just because it's something that is regulated. So
Right.
And then this could be beneficial to a few of my contractor associates, workers' comp in Ohio, and insurance.
It's a state program. So in the state of Ohio, to purchase workers' comp, you would have to reach out to the state. It's not necessarily something that you can just call up an agent and say, hey, I need this company or this coverage. And outside of the state of Ohio, other states, agents do have access to writing that kind of coverage.
Right. I've had on a couple commercial jobs, they've asked me like why my workers' comp isn't on my insurance policy, and I've had to explain that to them. They were from out of state, but yeah, that's a difference.
Every state's different. Same with auto insurance. Every state has different auto insurance laws, requirements, state minimum limit requirements. So it could be, state minimum limit required here in the state of Ohio, but completely different in the next state over. So when someone moves out of state and purchases a vehicle and registers a vehicle outside of the state, they would have to comply with that state's laws. So that's a common question that we get, if someone does move, can I keep my Ohio policy? Well, no, not once you've moved, not once you've registered your vehicle there. You would have to comply with that state's requirements.
Right.
That kind of sounds like an endorsement for why you should use a trusted local agent who's familiar with state policy, rather than spending 15 minutes and maybe saving 15% or more, but you might not have the coverage you need.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, I'd say that, we are all bombarded with these advertisements for so many different insurance companies. Not necessarily just because there's a great advertisement doesn't mean that they're a great insurance company. And it's super important, in my opinion, to have a local agent, whether it be, a captive agent or an independent agent like us, someone local, someone that understands what the requirements are, what the needs are in that area.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, it's a lot of times the companies who do spend the most on advertising who are the worst to deal with.
Yes.
They have less to pay out, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Dollars on advertising.
Clients, 10 times the rate.
Yeah.
I think that was pretty much all my questions. Tyler, did you have anything else?
I think we've covered it. The last question that we ask everybody is, Tara, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? So,
of course, phone or email are great ways. We do have, of course, a website that you can reach us on. It's castleins.com. 833-2107 is the phone number. And we're always available 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and happy to help.
All right, Tara, thank you so much. Tyler, thank you. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.